Hi BookTube, my name is Juan, I am just one reader, and today I am answering the Big Books tag. This is one of my all-time favorite tags on BookTube, and I don't think I've ever answered it before. Essentially, the premise or the idea of this book tag is to showcase some really big, long, dense tomes. Which is, it's a type of book that I really love when it's done well. I can really, really, really love getting very immersed and just really dive deeply into one of those huge, huge books, which are usually novels. It's very hard for me to find nonfiction reads that are, tomes that are so immersive. It's usually fiction for me. So the idea or the premise of this is to select some books that you have already read, some big books that you have already read. So what I will do in the first section of this book tag is to select 7 big tomes that I have already read and loved, because, not every huge chunkster or big novel is good or is enjoyable. For example, Brandon Sanderson. I have read one of his books before, The Final Empire, and it was long and it was trash. So I'm not counting, a big book that I didn't like. I'm gonna showcase 7 books that I absolutely loved. And then the second part of this video is to showcase 7 books, 7 long big books that I haven't read. So there are 2 purposes to this video. Firstly, to showcase some big books that I have loved, so that you can get some recommendations from me. And the second purpose is for me to showcase some books on my TBR, or some books that I own in my personal library that are long, and so that hopefully you can tell me, oh, this one is good, this one is not so much. You should read that, make that a priority, so that I can hype myself up for some big books. So without any further ado, let's get started with the 7 biggest, or some of the biggest, 7 big novels that or books that I have really loved. Here we go. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is a fantasy staple here on BookTube. This edition comes in at a whopping 846 pages, but it's not even that which makes it such a big book. It really is a dense, complex, slow, meandering, or very, very slow, complex fantasy. But I remember really, really loving the overall experience of reading this book. It's not a fantastic book. It's not one of my favorite books, but it has been one of those experiences that whenever I think back on it, I just really, really treasure it. Although I can tell you, I will probably not read it again, so I guess I'm still kind of ambivalent towards it. The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss comes in at 994 pages, and this is like a huge hardback. So this is really, really one of the longest books I've ever read, and it felt like it. This book is the second part in the Name of the Wind series, the Kingkiller Chronicle. I have, again, a kind of ambivalent relationship towards this series. I love The Name of the Wind. I think it's a perfect, flawless book that I really, really want to keep rereading. This one, however, it was strange. I really enjoyed the storytelling. I think Patrick Rothfuss is a great writer, a great character writer, and I really like his writing style and his storytelling ability overall. But there are some things that really make me very scared and afraid and dubious, full of doubts, very, very doubtful about where this series is going, if it ever is completed, which honestly I don't even know at this point. Hopefully it will be completed. Anyway, that's another rant. This book is not a perfectly constructed book, but it is an enjoyable book, and there are some parts and settings and scenes in here that I absolutely adored. It is very long. especially the beginning, like the first maybe 200 pages took me forever to get through, but then maybe the final 800 pages of this book I read in like 3 days. So very, very bingeable actually for me. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is a book that I just read this year, 2021. And this edition, which is a beautiful Everyman's Library edition, comes in at 891 pages. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars, though. I think there are some flaws, especially in the second half of the book. I think the first half of the book, however, is absolutely wonderful. I really loved Dickens's writing style, his characters, the way that he is, a very transporting, immersive kind of author, and I just really loved how funny it was. Very colorful. My first full Dickens that I've read, I think, and yeah. I recommend David Copperfield. Why shouldn't you read David Copperfield? Then we have The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, which is the second book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and this particular copy comes in at 906 pages long. It is quite long, but it feels very easy to read and very accessible. This one, the second book in the trilogy, as I said, is just wonderful. It's great. It has some great character arcs, great character development, amazing magic, and beautiful writing and dialogue. If you want good characters and really good, high quality, sophisticated fantasy, you should go with a Robin Hobb book and just forget about, the Brandon Sandersons of this universe. Next up, I have It by Stephen King, which is a whopper of a book. Like, it doesn't look like it's that long, but just look at this. This this Spanish edition of It is absolutely devastating in its size. It's like a pocket edition of it, and it is 1,503 pages long. So this is over 1,500 pages, and the font is pretty tiny. It's a book that you can read fairly quickly and fairly easily, as long as you don't focus on the not so important minutia of the story. Like, there's a lot of feeling, but it's a very enjoyable book. I really, really liked it. I do think it's one of the best Stephen King novels that I've read, and this makes the case for some novels that should be this long, because what King did in this, even though it has a lot of filler, I don't think it could have been done as well as he did in here in less space. So yeah. Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This huge paperback. I love this paperback because it's, like a very, very sturdy, big, but beautiful paperback, and it's really long. Comes in at 959 pages. It is long. It is absolutely one of the best adventures that I've had reading ever. It's just so bingeable and so filled with action and with anguish and love story, romance, crazy things. It's absolutely wonderful. It's one of the best storytelling feats of storytelling that I have ever read, and you are definitely missing out if you've only seen the movie, which is great, and not read the book. And finally, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is a really long book. I have this edition, which is the British little pocket edition, which I love. This is the one that I usually reread every time that I do reread it. And this edition, which is by Bloomsbury, comes in at 956 pages. So it is a chunkster, and it's just one of those early experiences of reading that I had in my early adolescence or late childhood, I guess. And I just really, really loved getting immersed into a reading project because, reading this book for the first time when you were 10 or 11 maybe definitely felt like a very daunting project and like something that you had to put a lot of effort into. So yeah, I just really love that experience of putting all the time and putting all the effort and sitting down and, making it work and plowing through this book, which is now my current favorite book in the Harry Potter series. Okay, so those are the books, the big books that I have already read and loved, and I would, of course, recommend them to you. Now let's move on to the 7 big, dense, daunting, intimidating books that I have on my TBR so that you can tell me in the comments if you think I should read them, if you think I should not read them at all, or what I should do. So here we go. First, I have The Stand by Stephen King, another Spanish version of a Stephen King book, which is just floppy, huge pocket editions. This one comes in at 1,585 pages long, so it's just a little longer than it. I've always wanted to read this. I have heard nothing but great things about it. I know that a recent adaptation was made and was very badly reviewed, so I'm steering away from that. I'm not gonna watch that, but I do want to see what the fuss is all about with the book. Then I have Bellfleur by Joyce Carol Oates, and this one is actually not as long. But it is a long book still. It is 733 pages long, so it is quite a long novel, but what makes this book feel so daunting to me is not so much the length, although that is a big factor, but it has more to do with the complexity of the language and the big epic scope of this family, the Bellfleur family, who live in this weird house. It's like a southern gothic generational story, and I've heard nothing but great things about this from the few people that have talked about it on BookTube. I think I will really love this. I love Joyce Carol Oates' writing from the 2 or 3 things I have read previously by her. But yeah, it does feel like it could be a little dense, at least getting into it. The Dragon Bone Chair by Tad Williams is another book that feels daunting, not so much because of its length. This one is actually only 635 pages long. It is a little bit of a longer book. It's fantasy, it's epic fantasy, and epic fantasy to me feels intimidating just because you have to really get into it. Get into, the settings, get to know the world, the way that the magic system kind of works, and you have to decipher, you have to get your footing, as it were, and, there's a lot of annexes and pronunciation guides, and, there's a lot of extra material in here, which makes it kind of daunting. But I have heard that it's a great story and a great take on fantasy, so if it works out for me, I will be able to read a trilogy, which is something that I really want to get into. I want to get into more good fantasy trilogies, not like Brandon Sanderson. Bleak House by Charles Dickens is the Charles Dickens novel that I have always wanted to read the most. It also is the most intimidating because of its size, but again, by the way, this is 891 pages long in the beautiful Everyman's Library edition that I own. This book feels so complex and so long and so complicated. It has to do with the justice system and with this like trial and documents and letters, and it just feels very complicated, but at the same time I feel strongly compelled to pick this book up because it is a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I admire. This is their favorite Dickens book. Donna Tartt, I think this is her favorite book. or one of her favorite books. It's also, I think, Jason's favorite book, Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse. So this book is highly revered and loved by many people that I admire or really enjoy their taste. So maybe I will. Then I have Skippy Dice by Paul Murray. This book actually doesn't even look like it's a big book. It's actually 661 pages long, which is not a lot, but it is kind of one of the longer books that I have on my TBR that I really am excited to read. This one has been recommended by Rick McDonnell from the channel Rick McDonnell. He's a Canadian booktuber that I really enjoy his taste. I really connect with him in many of the books that he has read. I think we really, have some common ground there. And he described this in a way that I have completely forgotten now, but I went on Amazon and I bought it. And it's supposed to be, I think, tragic, but really funny and really just a great experience. Talking about fantasy, Mordu by Alex Feby. This book has been on my shelf for quite some time now, and I really want to get into it. But again, it feels daunting. It is 617 pages long, which is not a lot. But again, there are so many guides and questions at the end and names of people, and it feels like a dictionary. So the actual book itself, the actual novel, is not that long. It's actually 500 and something pages. Yeah, the glossary starts on page 513. So this portion of the book, the final 100 pages, is just a glossary. So that makes it daunting to me, but I really want to get into this weird fantasy. And finally, I have cheated because I have selected the final book in the realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. This is book 3 in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. This is 853 pages long, which is quite long. And really, I just wanted to put some Robin Hobb here because I want to read everything by Robin Hobb, at least in the realm of the Elderlings series, which is a really long series made up of several other trilogies and a quartet. So I want to read Robin Hobb. I am cheating here because I already know that I will make these books a priority. So that was the big books tag. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video. And of course, I look forward to reading your comments down below, letting me know all of your thoughts. Thanks for watching.